And good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are around the world. I am Marcus Holmes, the facilitator of the Love and Stuff community, and what a joy and pleasure it is to come to you this Saturday evening on February the 20th with just about 8 more days of Black History Month moments that we will share with you as our celebration of February is Black History Month. I think you heard Reverend Darren Williams say yesterday that Black History celebration begins January 1st and ends December 31st. And we want to join in concert with that statement. But of course, we want to at least take these 28 days to aliven your thinking and consciousness around the excellence and the brilliance, the sacrifices and the details of African Americans and persons of African descent and their contributions to these United States of America. What a great contribution. And I hope that these moments will have you going down your own path of exploration to find out more about the lineage and history of a great people, if you happen to be of African American descent, and even if you aren't, that you will be enlightened and enriched to learn the many interesting facts and fascinating facts about African Americans and those of African descent. So Darren is joining us again, Reverend Darren Williams, transplanted to Oklahoma, but he is from Detroit, Michigan, and he is joining us again to share another great evening of insight. I think if you missed last night, you ought to go and watch it on the Love and Stuff page and enjoy all of the wonderful facts that he shared about. Started with 4 preachers and then kind of forayed into a few others. And if you're like me, you want to go and look up those others and read some more information on those preachers that he talked about yesterday. And so today he is going to share a bit more, and I'm just looking across platforms as a welcome to you. We're springboarding from our Love and Stuff page, of course, but we also have folks that are joining us on our LinkedIn Live, on Twitch TV, on YouTube events, and the Marcus R. Holmes page on Facebook as well. Click share right now and tag someone to enjoy this Black History Month moment. We have just about 8 more days. This is the end of our look at public figures, and we're closing it out with a look at pastors and preachers and men and women of clergy. Tomorrow we will begin with architecture and the arts. So we'll talk about some of the physical locations and some of the architects who built them, as well as art forms, genres such as music, gospel music, and many others that are reasons to make African Americans proud of the contributions and thankful of the sacrifices that many people have made for us to enjoy what we enjoy. I know we have so much farther to go as a nation. We're a young nation, but we have so much farther to go. But we have come to some degree, some miles in the journey. And so I hope that you will learn some of that in these moments with us. And so without further ado, I'm going to bring on Reverend Darren Williams. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening. Okay. Again.
So I got a little freeze there going on. I don't know if you're in your best spot with your signal, but I got a little bit
of not
okay.
It's better. Am I okay now? Am I
it's still
okay
giving
now?
me kind of a low signal. It's giving me a little bit of a low signal, but I'm certainly going to see if we can move forward. So it froze a little bit, but it looks like it's coming to.
Is it okay now?
Better, yes.
All right. If I need to use my, which will give a better signal. Is this okay?
Yeah, because your signal is unstable. It's a little unstable.
I was concerned about that.
Yep, so just slightly unstable. And while he's working that out, I just want to look across platforms. Thank you, Willie Rogers and Mike Flanoyle. Eric Powell, Corey Mildred King, Pam Caldwell, Eunice Hunter. Thank you so much. Thank you, those that are on YouTube events and those that are on LinkedIn Live. Let's see. We are on the, what page is this? We're on the Marcus R. Holmes page, or just check in with the Love and Stuff page. And you can drop in the comments your name and where you are. That just helps us to track with you, to know that you are here and enjoying. Maybe tonight is your first night, and if it is, welcome. We've been doing this for the last 20 nights, and we'll continue it through the 28th, where we will culminate in a celebration of Black History Month that will include many different aspects of our history, and I don't think that you want to miss that at all. So I'm just checking in with folks around. Hey, one of my favorite people in the world. Hello, Rochelle Weathers. Thank you for tuning in. Few folks that are on the Love and Stuff page, thank you so much. I appreciate all of you that are there. Click share and tag someone to join us. We're with Darren Williams, who is in Oklahoma and was experiencing, I think the weather hit them as well. And so I'm so grateful that he's able to be with us tonight. So click share and tag someone to learn a Black History moment as we close out this week's focus, which has been on public figures. You know, we started this week talking about political figures. So we talked about the first African-American senator. We talked about him, and I'm going to hold on to his name because I want to ensure that you get a chance to win a prize. So we're going to make sure that there's some prizes next Sunday. If you remember some of the things that happen in these Black History moments, you'll be able to win a prize. And then we talked about a protege of Thurgood Marshall this week as well. Of course, we did a tribute to Miss Cicely Tyson this week as well. We also did a tribute, an emotional tribute for me. I still don't know if I can fully explain the emotions that I felt in that tribute to Hank Aaron. And I would say, get a copy of his book, The Hank Aaron Story. It has in it some letters that were written to him during the time that he was getting ready to break Babe Ruth's record for the home runs. He also broke the RBIs, but a lot of hate mail. And he published some of those hate mail letters in his book. And some of them are riveting, hard to read. And I had read some of them before, but they were difficult for me to read. And in that well of emotion, it was an emotional tribute to him. So I hope that you'll go back and watch some of these. I think we hopefully a little better with Darren Williams. Okay, that looks much better. Looks like we're
good.
Solid
Very
connection.
Very good.
Thank you that are here with us across various platforms. And again, I hope you will click share and tag someone to join us with Darren Williams. Thank you so much, those that are here. Join us with Darren Williams. He is closing out our week of look at public figures. So we looked at politicians, we looked at athletes, we looked at celebrities, if you will, a movie star, film star. Cicely Tyson is all kind of star, right? And then we closed this week looking at men and women of the clergy. And so Brother Darren Williams, Reverend Darren Williams, you talked yesterday. I know you did snippets of 4 people, and you mentioned some great reads that we might have for some of them, especially James Cone, I think. But in your journey and learning about preaching, there seems to be a whole art and pedagogy around preaching. So I know it's a subject that would not be easily exhausted in 28 days. But as a Black preacher, what preacher or preachers, male or female, right? Because you talked a lot about the women being in the tradition. And I know in some parts of our religious experience, there have been and still today are some challenges for women that are in ministry. But who has been for you mentor, or do you look to as kind of your heroes in preaching?
Wow. Incredible question to ask. Very much so. Tragically, maybe they're all dead.
Okay.
Um, but of course, I've been in ministry 32 years, so that has a lot to do with that. But one of the names that immediately comes to mind is Turnell Nelson,
Okay.
uh, who lived and pastored in Trinidad and Tobago,
Mm,
who, to my mind, was one of the among the greatest breakers of the word of God that I have ever experienced.
mm,
And that was because of the life that he lived that backed up his preaching and his teaching.
mhm,
Incredible ones,
mm.
as a mentor. Um, and I think that when it comes to, and there are different ones for different reasons. It was him for
Sure.
the way that he was able to actually uh, interpret the word of God, the deep understandings
Mm,
of things in the scriptures. Of course, there were ones that I modeled after in terms of ministry, the way to minister to people. That was my father in the ministry, Dr. Ned Adams Jr.
mhm,
There were those who were pulpiteers, of
mhm,
course, who
mhm,
Donald Parsons is one of those.
mhm.
So there were different preachers for different ways of or different things that the preaching ministry is that I actually have looked up to.
And there are certainly some parts of nomenclature that you have said that maybe our viewers will not understand. So I got to double back to that.
Okay.
But you said you've been in preaching ministry for how long?
32
So you
years.
were relatively young when you.
I was, yes, young minded. Yes,
Mhm.
I was all of those things, but was clear about the call. I was very clear that God had called me to the gospel ministry. Yes.
Okay. And so you said pulpiteers, you said breaking of the word. So for
hmm
viewers that might have a little bit more layman aspect of that, when you say pulpiteer, you are conveying what?
I'm talking about the way a preacher is able to use the pulpit as far more than just a sacred desk, but
Mhm,
is able to transform from the space they stand, is able
mhm.
to transform the room into a communication station from God.
Okay. Okay. All right. And then you said the breaking of the word. I think when you went on to kind of clarify that, I think you said the interpretation, the deep understanding. Is that what?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes. Doing that part. That's the one side of it. The
Okay.
understandings to be able to have, the understand
Mhm,
the interpretation that you bring from that, but
mhm,
then being able to communicate that so that people can understand it. Because there are
mhm,
some things that you can get and understand, but you're not able to convey the message. But a
mhm.
breaker of that is able to get in there and break it, and then break it down to the audience too.
Got it. Got it. So kind
Mhm.
of a purveyor of that message, would you
Surely,
say?
surely
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I'm going to let you have at it. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to hear tonight's presentation, ladies and
Mhm.
gentlemen, whether you're on LinkedIn Live or Facebook Live or YouTube events or Twitch TV, Darren Williams.
All right. My time is the same, Brother Marcus. I'm assuming my time is the same, which leaves me 15 minutes for this slot. And I actually want to pivot tonight. I did talk about religious figures, women and men of the gospel who have been tall towers in the African American community as it relates to religion and our faith. I actually do want to pivot a little bit tonight and talk about African American scholars, because let me tell you why that is my interest tonight. Because we are so often want to hold up entertainers and athletes, singers, dancers, sports figures as important people who are in our community, and certainly so. We ought to do that because the kind of talent that is present in African American people, it's unparalleled. In fact, I would suggest to us that one of the gifts that God has given to us as a people is a certain spirituality. And you'll say, well, you're talking about entertainment. How are you talking about spirit? Now you're saying spirituality. What I am suggesting to us is that reach for what is beyond is part of what makes up our ability to be great entertainers, and all of the facets and all of the ways that we are, that reach for beyond, that spiritual essence that we have, and of course the physical essence of melanin makes up for what we are able to do so incredibly so as a people. And we should acknowledge that, we should regard that, and we should applaud that about ourselves. But as a people, we are so much more than entertainers. And one of the ways that I think we are really underrepresented on and as who we are is in our intellectual prowess. And so I have chosen to highlight again just a handful, maybe four, and I want to make an honorable mention also of one of the scholars in our community who represent us in the face of the world. The first one, again, that I want to talk about is a sister tonight, the Dr. Frances Kress Welsing, who I was introduced to her work and her practice. She was actually a psychiatrist, a child and adult psychiatrist by practice, by trade, but she was a scholar as well. Died 2016, which was a huge loss to us. And let me start just a little with her bio. Frances Kress Welsing was a psychiatrist, best known. I'll talk about what she's best known for a little bit later. Um, Welsing, who was the child of physician Henry Kress and teacher Ida Mae Griffin. Now, don't miss that. Don't let that be lost on us, sisters and brothers, that Dr. Welsing came from the home of a doctor, a physician, her father, Henry Kress, and her mother, who was a teacher. She grew up as the middle of three daughters. She received her bachelor's of science from Antioch College in Ohio in 1957, and her medical degree, MD degree, from Washington, D.C.'s Howard University in 1962. After earning her MD, Welsing stayed in Washington, D.C., pursuing a career in child and general psychiatry. Welsing spent nearly 25 years working as a staff physician for D.C.'s Department of Human Services, and also as the clinical director of two schools catering to children with emotional disabilities. And I want us to pay attention, careful attention, to these other details about her career, her work and her career, because she did not earn these highest degrees that academia has to offer and cordon herself off in the ivory tower. She remained working among the people. She took from the best of what academia had to give to the communities where people live. Mentioned here that she worked Department of Human Services, also the clinical director of two schools catering to children with emotional disabilities. Welsing opened up her own practice in DC in 1967. Through her published works and her research, Welsing sought, listen to this, to help bring about a solution to the mental health problems of the Black community by understanding racism. Very interesting concept there. And now we are paying attention to mental health issues, especially among African Americans now. But this sister in the late 60s and early 70s, that's where she actually directed her work to. Welsing published her first major work, The Kress Theory of Color Confrontation, as an essay in 1974, while assistant professor at Howard University. In the controversial essay, Welsing argued that the drive for white supremacy and superiority stems from a pervasive feeling of inadequacy and inferiority. Welsing claimed that whiteness was, in fact, a deficiency evidenced by the inability of whites and other races to produce melanin, which generates skin color. In short, white people in America could not cohabit peacefully with their black peers, according to Welsing, because of a deep-seated jealousy of people with melanin and their embrace of racial supremacy to accommodate these feelings. The essay was controversial and, according to Welsing, prevented her from not only gaining tenure at Howard, but in fact losing her teaching post. And let me make just a passing comment as I go move to the last part of this biography of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. You'll have to remember, or at least know, that during this time, white scholars and talking heads, William F. Buckley is one, but other white scholars were publishing all kinds of materials talking about the deficiency in African Americans, about the inferiority of African Americans, and talking about why the way society has ended up is because African Americans were not on par with white people. Nobody challenged that work. They didn't get chided. Nobody said anything negative about what they were publishing about African American people. But when she speaks publicly in terms of her writing, when she publishes this work, she gets all kind of flack because the understanding was Black people were not supposed to be challenging whiteness. And remember, this is the late 60s, early 70s. Her biography goes on. In 1991, Welsing published her most famous work, a collection of essays titled The ISIS Papers, The Keys to the Colors, which discussed in depth the issues of white supremacy and racism in the United States. In the ISIS Papers, Welsing delved deeper into her theories of melanin deficiency among whites as the driver of racism, white supremacy, and white segregation. Aside from her published racial and social theories, Welsing was an advocate for strong African American family unit. She advised Black men and women to delay having children until their 30s. Hear this. Instead, take the time to thoroughly educate themselves so as to rear the next generation of high functioning and disciplined Black Americans who could challenge white superiority. Dr. Kress Welsing, I said this already, died in DC January 2nd, 2016, after being hospitalized with a stroke. And I'll say this as I'm easing out of the biography for Dr. Welsing. In the book, The ISIS Papers, which I highly recommend, both of them for sure, but I highly, highly recommend The ISIS Papers to you all, because it's in this book that she lays out the scientific, the biological evidence that it is possible only through two Black parents to produce offspring, direct offspring, any color on the pigmentation color scheme, so that any pair with a pair of two Black progenitors, a Black mother, Black father, a child of any color can be produced from that union. And that is the only union that exists on the planet that can produce such children. She talks about that. She lays that evidence out in her book, The ISIS Paper, The Keys to the Color. Next, I want to talk about who is, she's one of my favorites. Everyone I'm bringing to you is a favorite of mine. But there, obviously, with everything, there are some people and their work who are closer to us than others. Dr. Kress Welsing, that's my girl. She's my girl. But this fella, and it's probably because I've met him personally, is why he is one of my personal favorites. This is Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. Dr. Van Sertima, I won't read his whole bio. I'll just snatch a couple of things out of that. But I'll tell you what I know about him myself. He's born in Guyana, not even American, but he is of African descent, and he claims his blackness fully. Very interesting. He didn't even attend university. They were so poor there in Guyana. He didn't even attend university until he was 30 years of age, is when he got his undergraduate degree. The first time he was able to study at the college level, he was 30 years old. He was educated in the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. That's where he got the university, and then graduated from Rutgers University, where he held a degree in Africana study. And he was the chair of Africana studies at the time of his death. That's where he had taught for several years and had held the chair of the department there. During the decade of the 1960s, he broadcast weekly from Britain to Africa and to the Caribbean, excuse me. As a literary critic, he is the author of Caribbean Writers, a collection of critical essays on the Caribbean novel. So get this now. He is holds degrees in Africana studies, but he is also a literary critic. And I'm bringing this out to us. I'm highlighting this for us to see the range of his work and his ability as an African diasporic scholar. I need to read you that part too. He has been honored as a historian of world repute by being asked to join UNESCO International Commission for rewriting the scientific and cultural history of mankind. The UNESCO is an organization that's developed by the United Nations that deals with issues of science and scientific matters around the world. Ivan Van Sertima was invited to be asked to join that commission. And let me tell you what other singular honor that he has. This will be something of note for us to really pay attention to. Coming up to the sesquicentennial celebration of Columbus Day, this would have been 1992. He was asked by UNESCO to present his research from a book that he had written back in the 70s, 1977, his most notable work, which is called They Came Before Columbus. In this book, I recommend to every African American I recommend to every American to read this book, They Came Before Columbus. In the book, Dr. Van Sertima puts forth the most comprehensive documented evidence that as few as 200 years before Columbus, but as many as 1,000 years before him, that not only had Africans been to these shores, to the Americas, but that Africans had left their mark on these shores. UNESCO understood of Dr. Van Sertima's writing and invited him to present before them prior to this sesquicentennial celebration of Columbus Day, the 500 year. After Van Sertima presented from his research from this book, UNESCO said that it is not proper ever again to use the term discovery associated with Christopher Columbus and the Americas. His research alone and his presentation to UNESCO changed UNESCO's outlook and description of the 500th year celebration of Christopher Columbus. And he did this just because of his research. This is the kind of what African Americans, what Africans, people of African descent are able to bring when we are in our fields of study. And this is history that he actually brings as a presentation. But not only is he a historian in that sense, not only of Africana studies, but he is also a linguist. I don't have time to read how he's even published in the many things that he's published in language, but one of the ways that he established the African presence in the Americas is because some of the words that the indigenous people used were words that sounded like words that came from the African continent. And he was able to match up linguistically how the people in the Americas, the indigenous people here, had learned those words from the travelers who came from the continent of Africa. He also found that there were plants that only grew in Africa, that grew in Africa originally, and that they were here in the United States as well, proving again in another way how that African peoples had traveled to these shores. Professor of Africana Studies, I mentioned that at Rutgers University. Dr. Van Sertima was also visiting professor at Princeton University. He is the editor of the Journal of African Civilization, which he founded in 1979 and has published several major anthologies which have influenced the development of multicultural curriculum in the United States. And let me tell you a little bit about what is being said there. He published this Journal of African Civilizations, and he was the chief editor of that. The reason he published it, as he explains, is because the truth about African and African American history is known by many scholars throughout the world, European scholars, American scholars, white scholars around the world. They have been extremely limited in writing about and publishing what are the real truths, one of those of which about Africans coming to the Americas far before Columbus ever got here. They are slow to ever publishing those things because of what it will do to establish history and the established educational systems in this country. He said then, if the world is to know, and if African people in the diaspora are to know what we have really done, then we will have to have our own publishing houses to be able to get that message out. And so he created then this Journal of African Civilizations. Let me list just a couple of the anthologies that he had published through his Journal of African Civilization. Blacks in Science, Ancient and Modern. Black Women in Antiquity. Egypt Revisited. Child of Africa. Presence, African presence in early Asia. African presence in early Europe. African presence in early America. Great African thinkers, and this is what I'm talking to us about tonight, African thinkers, African American thinkers. Great Black leaders, ancient and modern, and the golden age of the Moor. These are some of the works that he has presented has published through his Journal of African Civilizations. I mentioned earlier that I met Dr. Van Sertima. It was in the year 19, I think it was 97, when I was back home in Detroit. One of the churches, Fellowship Chapel, Wendell Anthony, pastor there, had invited Dr. Van Sertima to present on the book They Came Before Columbus. And I don't know how in the world I found out that he was going to be there, but I was there. I already had the book. And so I wanted to meet the man who had written this book. I got contact with him when I was in college, and it was one of the books that changed the trajectory of where my education was actually going. And so I went to the seminar. I went to the seminar and was able to meet him, and I have my signed copy of They Came Before Columbus with Ivan Van Sertima's autograph in the book. And so I'm especially, beholden to him as a scholar for his work, for all that he does, of course, and has done, but because I've actually physically, personally met him. Um, Very briefly, I have two more that I want to talk about very quickly. I have one more that I want to talk about very quickly. Um, and of course, this kind of subject, they could take all, as Brother Marcus said, it would take more than 28 days to be able to talk about all of even the brilliance that we are as thinkers and as so many other things just beyond what we are usually regarded and known as. I want to present formally to us the last scholar, the last thinker, and I'll mention just a couple of others after him. I won't do bios on them, but I have to mention, I cannot leave without talking about Sheikh Anta Diop. He was born in Dakar, Senegal, so he was Senegalese. I have to literally take my breath when I speak on Dr. Diop because he was a politician. He was a biologist. He was an anthropologist. He was an Egyptologist. He was a paleontologist, which many of us may not even know what a paleontologist is. Master of 13 different disciplines. This man, one of the tragedies, I think, of the American educational system is the failure to mention the likes of a man like Sheikh Anta Diop. And they'll tell us about Albert Einstein, and they'll tell us about these other scholars. But when it comes to just the volume of his mastery in terms of study, there is no intelligence that we can name that parallels Sheikh Anta Diop. And I know I'm building him up really tall. But for you to be able to go and to study him, you would understand exactly what I'm talking about. Who I just mentioned, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, has a YouTube video where he is dedicated some hour and 40 something minutes just talking about the accomplishments and the achievements of Sheikh Anta Diop. Two things I'll tell you, and I'll do a little biographical sketch. In fact, let me do the biographical piece first, and then I'll tell you these other two things. A distinguished historian and Pan-Africanist political leader, Sheikh Anta Diop, was born in Diourbel, Senegal in 1933, December. He grew up in both Quranic and French colonial schools, and so the Islamic country with a French domination of Senegal at the time he was born and grew up. Upon completing his bachelor's degree in Senegal, Diop moved to Paris, where he began his graduate studies at the Sorbonne in 1946 in physics. Now, it's already told you he was a historian. I told you that. It's already said he's a political leader. I told you that. Now, physics, we see him with a graduate, doing graduate studies in physics. Once at Sorbonne, however, listen to this, Diop became involved in the African students' anti-colonial movement, where young intellectuals worked for African independence. He helped organize the first Pan-African Student Congress in Paris in 1951, and in 1956 participated in the first World Congress of Black Writers and Artists in Paris. Which would be of great interest is that at this World Congress of Black Writers from the United States, several writers from the Harlem Renaissance were in attendance at this Congress that Diop was a part of there. These movements laid the groundwork for a growing African liberation sentiment supported by the ideological arguments of negritude, Marxism, and Pan-Africanism. And so what we're seeing immediately with him is that at a young age, he is involving himself with liberation movements for African countries, for African people. Committed to the richness of African history, Diop, in 1951, his PhD dissertation looked into ancient Egyptian history, and the influence it had on European culture. Listen to this. At the time when European cultural superiority was the accepted notion, Diop proclaimed that African civilizations were the inspiration and origin of European accomplishments. The Sorbonne, this is the educational institution where he was doing these graduate studies at, rejected his dissertation. Yet, his work nevertheless received worldwide attention. In 1955, his work was published as Nations Negres et Culture, Negro Nations and Culture, a publication that would make him one of the most widely known and controversial historians of his era. Partly due to the response to the book in 1960, Diop was awarded his doctorate by the Sorbonne that same year, the same year that Senegal gained its independence, and Diop returned to his home country. One last thing I want to read us, and I'll tell you just, here it is. In Senegal, after he'd returned home, Diop was appointed a research fellow at Institut Fondamental d'Afrique Noire at Dakar. That would be the Fundamental Institute of Black Africa at Dakar University, where he set up, listen to this, a radiocarbon dating laboratory. We don't realize this, and this is the kind of history that I love to bring to us, that Cheikh Anta Diop's research in radiocarbon dating, it is what he brought to the field that developed it to the point that we understand today and are able to date that a rock has been sitting here for 55,000 years. It is the work that Diop has done that when fossils are found and it comes to time to be able to date how old these things are, to estimate, it's the work that Cheikh Anta Diop has done that allows for us to know how old these things really are, at least to give an estimate of how old they are. The last thing on Diop that I'll share on tonight, he and Theophilo Benga, which is another African scholar, was invited to present before a European panel on the history of Africa, on the origins of humanity. Their approach of the origins of humanity began with the history of Africa. Two scholars, Cheikh Anta Diop, Theophilo Benga, against some cadre of 20 European scholars. Their research and presentation was so impeccable. Nothing that these 20 scholars together brought was able to lay any claim against the factual evidentiary nature of what they had given. And so these brothers, Cheikh Anta Diop and Theophilo Benga, are heralded around the world in scholarly circles as some of the greatest intellect, some of the greatest mind that has been produced. I could talk to us also about Runoko Rashidi, who is a living scholar and his own words, a disciple of Ivan Van Sertima. Runoko Rashidi has videos all across the internet. In fact, you can find some information, some video about all of these. Dr. Kress Welsing has several videos on YouTube, and so does Cheikh Anta Diop. And he speaks in French. He only has French, and so the work that the interviews that he's doing is translated So you'll have to give intelligent attention to listening to that. But Van Sertima, Runoko Rashidi, all of them have videos all across YouTube. And I would really, really encourage you to look up Runoko Rashidi, because, again, he is a living scholar who takes tours across the continent of Africa every couple of years. And he's got one that's coming up, I think, to Ghana later in this year. But look up Runoko Rashidi. And then the last name that I'll share with us for tonight is a brother, a living brother who is, he's already my age, at least. He's a 50-year-old brother, Robert Hamilton, somebody that I know personally. I just talked to his wife, a dear, dear friend of my sister. She's my little sister since college. She told me in conversation yesterday that he had just completed, at the end of the new year, are y'all ready for this? A textbook. He just completed the writing of a textbook. He is a PhD in ecological studies. The title of his book, Introduction to Ecology. And so this is not just some little small textbook for some little school or some school district. An Introduction to Ecology is a massive that is to be presented to the educational system. This brother's 52-year-old brother. Dayton, Ohio is where they live. He's a professor at Kent State University there. After the review committee, the editorial committee reviewed his textbook, the singular honor that Robert Hamilton has received with the writing of his textbook, there are two. The first honor, singular honor, is they relayed to him, this is the first time anyone has written a textbook that they had not had to make any corrections or any changes to. The second honor Dr. Robert Hamilton has in writing this textbook, somebody I personally know, is that they have asked him to begin writing a second edition to this textbook. What I'm saying to us tonight, and I'm closing with this, that among us as African American people, as Africans in the diaspora, are some of the greatest minds that the world has ever known. It's not just that has been the case in history with the Sheikh Anta Diaps and with even our African pharaohs who were huge intellects. But in this day that we live in, there are people who are living and breathing among us that we can actually touch and know, who are scholars, who have amazing capacities of mind. This is who we have been as a people. This is who we are. And I suggest to us that to look at and see, to discover who we are. Self-knowledge will come self-love, will come self-respect, will come self-determination. And we can change the course where we have been and direct the course of where we are going. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to share in this Black history and Black African-American heritage series on tonight.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well done. Thank you for sharing. I'm sure these are some small known facts to many and maybe known facts to some, and you went in depth to share so much more. Thank you, Reverend Darren Williams, for what a great Black history moment this has been, Africans in the diaspora and African Americans. And he has promised to be back with us next week as we talk about architecture next week. And so look for that as he will return and share from this wealth of knowledge. I just love the excitement that you have in sharing. And I think that is just a contagion, and I hope it is. I hope that other people will be inspired to self-knowledge and be inspired to begin a journey, embark upon a journey of learning more about our rich heritage and, as you say, rich scholars and scholarship within that heritage. So thank you so much, Darren Williams, for being with us. I hope that you've enjoyed our Black History Moment. I'm looking across platforms, and thank you for joining, from Darius Brooks, who's one of my musical mentors, all across to folks that are on LinkedIn. Thank you so much. We invite you back tomorrow to join us at 7:00 p.m. Again, we're going to, in our last week, closing week, look at architecture and the arts. So we'll be looking at building and the genre, the different genres that are covered by art, right? So again, we don't have enough days in the month to really expound upon the richness, the vastness of our heritage and history, but we're certainly going to try to share some. And so this week we'll be talking about not only architecture and the architects who may have created some of the architecture and designed it, but also those that are in the arts. And one of my favorite art forms, of course, is gospel music. So we'll have some information on gospel music as well. And so we're just excited that you will be with us and join us for these next 7 days. And then on the 28th, a week from tomorrow, we will close out our Black History Month celebration with Darren Williams and others within the community, Valencia Etner, Valerie Colbert Osamwadi, Aria Moody. We have a number of folks that Ursula Merritt Bird, that will join in collective with us, where we will share history from tap dance to Negro spirituals and many of the things in between. You don't want to miss it. It will be live Sunday, the 28th at 6:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we will ensure that we share it through Restream on all of these social media channels where you're watching it now, and I hope that you will join us then. See you tomorrow evening at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to click share and invite someone along this journey of Black History Month moments, and go to the Love and Stuff page and click follow. Follow us on an extraordinary journey, as you heard Darren Williams say, self-knowledge and self-love and self-respect and self-determination. Follow us on that journey, and you will forever be glad that you've joined an extraordinary community that is on that journey. Have a grateful evening.